In today's video, I'm going to go through kind of some of the basic steps that I take and try my best to teach you guys what to look for and how to scout turkeys. Let's jump into it. What a roller coaster of a season it has been. Came in downwind, it actually winded me. So this morning, I'm actually out here at a piece of public I've been on once or twice, but it's still relatively new to me. And I'm out here with my brother, and it is the week before the 2020 Missouri season, and we are scouting for turkeys. Right at daybreak, we hit an owl hoot call, and we had a gobbler sound off that really wasn't far from the parking lot, and was in an area that I already thought they were going to be roosting. And from a couple of visits prior, I kind of know the circle that they make because I bumped some turkeys on here walking in later in the morning. And so we now have a really good idea where to set up if we come back here to turkey hunt. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk to you guys about today, because for a long time as a beginning turkey hunter, I didn't know that you could scout for turkeys. I didn't know what to look for. I didn't know what to do. I didn't even know that it was a thing. And I think a lot of people still don't. And I think as people get curious about that, the next evolution in that process is, well, what do I look for? And that's what we're going to cover today. So when it comes to scouting turkeys, there's three main categories that I want to cover. One is digital scouting, the second is observation, and the third is boots on the ground. And a lot of those have little subcategories into them. So we're just going to jump into the first one, which is digital scouting. The first step towards digital scouting any property is looking at the property on a map. It doesn't matter how you do it, whether it's paper or online. I personally like to use the app called OnX. OnX is an app that you can pay for. You don't have to pay for it to use it, but I would highly recommend that you subscribe to it if you do, because not only does it show you an aerial view, it gives you a topographical view, it gives you a hybrid view where you can view the aerial and the topographical at once, but it also lets you, if you pay to subscribe to the app, it'll also show you any land that's public that you can hunt. And just a disclaimer, I'm not sponsored by OnX or anything like that. It's just a pretty vital tool for how I hunt, and I really, really like to use it. So when it comes to digital scouting and using digital scouting to scout for turkeys, there's a couple of things that you're going to want to key in on. The first is water sources. Turkeys are only active during the daytime, and they're going to need to drink water at least once a day. So you're going to want to locate your hidden ponds in the woods, your creeks. River bottoms are actually a favorite of mine. Every river bottom I've ever been to is teeming with wildlife, so that's a really good place to start. But it's a really good idea if you're thinking about, where turkeys are going to be, where can I hunt them. Water sources are always a good place to start. The next thing that you're going to want to look at is transition areas. So what a transition area is, and I'll try to show an example of that now, of what that looks like on an aerial map, but it is where two different types of terrain meet. It can be where a field meets hardwoods. It can be where hardwoods meets pines. It can be where a river bottom meets an open field. It's basically just a meeting of any two terrain types, and that creates an edge. Usually those edges have a really good cover and really good food. So any type of wildlife, especially turkeys, deer included, really like the security and the forage that these things provide, and they're a really good starting point for trying to find turkey sign. So anytime you can see something like that on a map, and it's going to vary depending on where you're watching from, what that may look like in your area, but anytime you can see anything like that, it's worth checking. The last thing I look for with digital scouting is terrain features. Terrain features are features of land specific to the animal that you're trying to chase. So for a deer, that would be like a bottleneck or a pinch point, or maybe where two fields are joined together by a strip of woods. For turkeys, it looks a little bit different. A lot of the features are going to be the same. One of my favorite features to look for with turkeys, and I'll try to throw an example of what that looks like right up here, is big ridges. So imagine a ridge running this way, and a lot of micro ridges coming off of it, or valleys, that make little mini ridges coming off of that. Those are called fingers. And why this is attractive to a turkey is a lot of times if there's fingers on one side, there's fingers on the other. Not always, but most of the time. And a turkey a male turkey usually makes his way to what's called a strut zone, which we'll talk a little bit more about that later. A strut zone is a place that a male turkey can be and be seen or heard by other turkeys, preferably both. What's so appealing about a big ridge with fingers coming off of it like this is he can zigzag back and forth side to side and gobble down each one of these little valleys and potentially be heard by a different hen each time he does it. So instead of just gobbling into one valley or one bottom, he can maybe gobble into 8, and the potential for him to be heard by a hen is a lot more. And so for those reasons, that's a really, really attractive spot to a turkey. High points and fields, if you're hunting like low-lying areas or pasture land, are also very, very attractive to birds because they can be heard and seen from a long ways away. Do some reading, find out what turkeys like in the area that you're hunting. Learn to identify those on a topographical map, and then you'll be able to mark those and walk them later and potentially have some pretty good turkey hunting spots. The next step in learning how to scout turkeys, once you've put in the homework, you've looked at your maps, you've got a bunch of areas to check out, is do some observations. Observations consist of a couple different things. The first step being drive-bys. When I'm looking at a new piece of property or I'm going to scout it for turkeys, the first thing I will do is drive the entire property and mark every access point. The next thing I'll do is look at the property on a map and mark all the roads that go through it. These tell you where other people are most likely to be, and where other people are most of the time, unless it's got low pressure, turkeys are not going to be. It's a really good starting point. The next step, and I do this in conjunction with the drive-bys, is listening. Once I've drove by the property, I've looked on the map, I think turkeys are going to be here, here, and here. I will drive to those spots of a morning or of an evening, and I will just listen. Sometimes I'll bring an owl hooter to try to coax a gobble out of one. But the things you're listening for in the morning is, one, gobbles. Gobbles are a dead giveaway. There is a gobbler there. I can kill him. But not all male turkeys gobble. And some mornings they're just quiet. So the other things that I'll listen for is scratching. If you hear... That's kind of what it sounds like when a turkey is scratching for leaves and eating, and especially if there's more than one turkey, they sound like a train coming through the woods. They're just super, super loud. The other thing that I listen for is flying down of a morning. Turkeys are pretty loud when they fly down, and you can hear it from a ways off, and then flying up in an evening. And then just listening for regular turkey sounds, clucks, purrs, yelps. You can hear all that from a long ways away. If you'll just go to a spot that you think turkeys are, sit down and be quiet, you'll be surprised by what you can hear. Glassing is another thing you can do as far as observations go, if your terrain allows it. If you're hunting terrain with a lot of steep ridges that you can glass from the road, do that. If you're hunting like really low-lying pasture or agricultural areas where you can glass from fields from a mile away, do that. Any intel you can gain in that area is going to help you out. And then the last thing as far as observation, and this in my opinion is an overlooked area in the way of turkey scouting, is trail cameras. If you think that you have a strut zone marked out, if you think there's an old logging road that these turkeys are using, throw a trail camera out there and check it in a week or so. You'd be surprised by what you find on there and how effective those can actually be as far as like locating turkeys. The last thing we are going to talk about in terms of learning to scout turkeys and what to look for when you're scouting turkeys, and this is probably the biggest area we're going to cover, is boots on the ground. Once you've done your homework and you've marked a lot of areas on a map, and then you've done your observation work, you've glassed for these turkeys, you've drove by, you've listened, you've done observation sits, it is now time to put some boots on the ground. When you put the boots on the ground and you're walking through these areas, there is a couple of things that you're looking for. The first things that I'm looking for, or one of the first things on my mind, is turkey tracks. It's pretty easy to tell the difference between a male turkey and a female turkey by the tracks. Male turkey tracks are about 4 to 4.5 inches long, and female turkey tracks are about an inch shorter. Another thing I look for when I see tracks is, what direction are they going? Are their tracks going this way and coming back, or are they just going one way? That can tell you an awful lot about whether that turkey's making a circle or he's going specifically to one place and then coming back. Another thing that I'll look for in conjunction with tracks is, what are the tracks around? Are they around food? Do they look like they're in a strut zone? Do they look like they're heading to a strut zone? Do they look like they're heading to food? These are all pieces of the puzzle that you can use to try to formulate a game plan to hunt these birds. When you're looking at turkey tracks too, also look for little lines in the sand that'll be that turkey's wings dragging. Was he strutting when he made these tracks? Are there droppings with the tracks? Are there one set of droppings, or are there a bunch? Is it one turkey, or is it a group of them? These are all things that you can kind of start to tell if you see some turkey tracks. So make sure that you make a note of that if that's something you see while you're out and about. The next thing that I look for, and one of the most obvious telltale signs that a turkey is in the area, is scratching. Just like what I talked about earlier, what you can hear when they rake those leaves back, it makes about a, I don't know, 2 by 2 foot area where you can tell the leaves were just bashed out of the way. And what I'll look for when I see scratching is, what are they eating on? Are they eating on acorns? Are they scratching for bugs? Is there some other kind of food source that they're eating that I don't know about? What are they eating when they make those scratches? Because if I know that, I can then apply that to other areas in that same tract of public and potentially get on some more birds. I also look at which direction the scratches are being pawed at, because that gives me a direction of travel. These turkeys were feeding this way. I'll look at how many scratches there are. Was it one bird? Was it a flock? When I see tracks or scratch marks or anything like that, I'm also looking for turkey droppings. I don't know if I have a video of what that looks like. If I do, I'll throw it in here. But you can also, I've read, and I don't know this to be fact, but a lot of people say that you can tell a tom's droppings from a hen's droppings. A tom's droppings usually have like a J shape to them, and it'll be slightly bigger. A hen's droppings kind of have like a spiral shape to them. So I always keep that in mind when I see that. The last two things we're going to talk about, strut zones and roost trees. We're going to start with strut zones. So there's a couple of different ways to identify a strut zone. If it's a high point on a ridge and you're finding drag marks where the wings are dragging, and you know you've been by here and you've listened and it sounds like you hear a turkey up there, especially if you hear one there late in the morning. Like when they break from their hens and they go to an area and they just hang out in that area and they won't leave and they gobble, 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 that's a strut zone. If you can identify a strut zone, you've got a really good chance of killing that bird. And there's a ton of different ways you can set up on them. The best way is just an ambush, because you know at some point that turkey will probably be there during the day. And the best thing to do is try to kill that turkey off the roost in the morning, and then if he doesn't, you make a wide loop around and you try to set up on his strut zone and kill him that way. But strut zones, just keep this in mind when you're looking for them. That turkey is going there to be seen or heard, preferably both, by other turkeys. If you see an area that looks like it fits that description and it's on a high point, especially if you've done some observation sits and you know for a fact that there's turkeys that gobble in there, especially late in the morning, you've got yourself a strut zone. Mark that on a map. That is probably going to be super, super helpful as far as knowing where to go kill a turkey. And the last thing that I want to talk about are roost trees. Roosting trees are kind of hard to pinpoint because turkeys roost in a lot of different trees. Mostly what you're looking for is heavy, mature timber with big limbs that are kind of horizontal in nature. They can't roost on a limb that goes like this. They can have a little bit of an angle to them, but you're looking for big limbs that kind of go out like that. I've done a lot of reading and had a lot of personal experiences that say turkeys like to roost where their droppings can fall into the water. This could be to evade predators. It also could be that water is in a low spot and there's usually a ridge feeding down into any water source that's not a pond, like a creek or a river, and maybe it's easier from the turkeys to fly off the top of that ridge into the trees below. Whatever the reasoning is, I don't know, but creek beds are a really good spot to start looking for roost trees. Evergreens are another good spot that turkeys like. If you've ever seen an evergreen, they are the easiest tree to climb because they have big, solid limbs that are almost completely horizontal when they come out. For that reason, turkeys love them. You can also confirm a roost tree by looking at the sign underneath. Is there droppings underneath? Is there scratching nearby? All these things are little pieces of the puzzle, but if you can, and another way you can identify a roosting tree is by observing. If you're noticing a pattern here, it's that all these things kind of work together. And if you find one, you often find another thing. But if you'll sit and listen a couple of mornings, a lot of times you can pinpoint some roost trees just by listening to where those turkeys fly down or gobble in the morning. So that is pretty much it on this video. I hope this content really, really helped you guys out. I hope it's going to get you out into the woods and start looking for some of this sign, because the more you do this, especially pre-season, the easier and more likely it's going to be that you're going to get on some birds and kill them. If this video helped you out, make sure that you like it, make sure that you drop a comment, make sure that you subscribe to the channel, and if I'm going to leave you with one thought in this area, it's that all these things work together. If you find a track, try to find out if it's coming from a roost tree or going to a strut zone. If you find droppings, is the scratching nearby? Like, all these things work together and they help you formulate a plan. And the biggest thing that you're trying to do with all this is find that turkey's daily routine. Because if you do all this groundwork and you find all these things out and you figure out the circle that these turkeys are making, because turkeys are creatures of habit. They'll usually make the same circle every day. If you can find out that circle, it gives you a point of ambush at almost any time of day, because roost trees, obviously that's early morning. Strut zones, that's later in the morning. Roost trees, you can hit those again in the evening if your state allows hunting in the evening. But it's all pieces of the puzzle that'll allow you to set up on these birds at any point in the day. And the last thought I'll leave you with, and this goes for any type of scouting, any type of game, you have to do it often. The findings that you have this week may not be the same next week. It will definitely be not the same the week after that. You have to update where you're scouting. These turkeys' food sources are gonna change. Their preferred roosting locations as the foliage comes in is gonna change. You have to make sure that you have the most current information if you're gonna stay on these birds, potentially kill them. Guys, like I said, I hope this video helped you out. Appreciate you watching. I will see you in the next one.